I want to ask you something before we start. Have you ever walked into a room you've been in 100 times, and felt with complete certainty that you are not alone? Not a sound, not a shadow, just a feeling that hits you the moment you cross the threshold. Most people shake it off, write it down to stress or tiredness or an overactive imagination. But some people, the ones who sent me these stories, they didn't shake it off, because what they saw next made it impossible to pretend. 5 stories tonight, 5 people who stopped pretending. By the time this is over, you might stop too.
The SpiritVox, it's alive.
This story was shared with us by a woman named Addie. She asked us not to use her real name. What she described happened to her family over a period of several years in a 2-story house in South Philadelphia, a house her grandfather had purchased decades earlier. I want you to picture this house carefully because the layout matters. 2 stories, a small rear courtyard accessible through a back door on the ground floor, and at the very top, above the second-floor stairwell, a small attic room, the kind of room that juts up from the roof with a single window facing the back of the property. The family called it the top room. Nobody used it. They never really said why. It just wasn't a room people went into. When Addie's family first moved in, strange things started quietly, the kind of things you explain away. Furniture sounds from upstairs when everyone was downstairs. A dragging noise, like someone sliding a heavy chair across hardwood. Her uncle, a practical, no-nonsense man, came down one morning and asked who had been rearranging furniture in the second-floor bedroom at midnight. Nobody had. He checked. Everything was exactly where it had been. This happened enough times that it became normal. Nobody talked about it. Nobody investigated. You just learned to sleep through it. Then the first real incident. Addie's uncle decided one evening to take a friend up to the top room. He wanted to show him the view from the small roof window. You could see half the city from up there on a clear night. They went up. They sat by the window. They talked for an hour. The friend eventually fell asleep on one of the old cots that had been left up there. Addie's uncle stayed awake reading. Sometime past midnight, he felt something change. He described it as the air going heavy, like pressure dropping before a storm, except there was no storm. The night was clear. The window was shut. He put his book down. He looked around the room, and then he looked up, because something made him look up. In the corner of the room near the ceiling, pressed into the angle where the wall met the roof, was a shape, dark, solid, the size and rough outline of a large person, except it was folded into that corner in a way that a person could not physically be. Arms at wrong angles, head tilted too far, like something that had learned the shape of a human body, but hadn't quite gotten the proportions right. It was completely still, and it was looking at him. Addie's uncle did not scream. He said later that the fear was so complete it bypassed panic and went straight to paralysis. He sat there for what felt like several minutes, unable to move, staring up at the shape in the corner. Then he managed to say, barely audible, a prayer his grandmother had taught him as a child. 3 lines. He said them twice. The shape did not move, but something shifted in the room. The pressure lifted slightly. He could breathe normally again. He reached over and shook his friend awake. "We're leaving," he said, "right now. Don't look at the ceiling. Just get up and walk to the stairs. His friend, half asleep and confused, did exactly that. They never went back to the top room. But that wasn't the end of it. The family's housekeeper, a woman who had worked for them for years, went up to the roof one afternoon to hang laundry on the line that ran along the edge of the back terrace. It was broad daylight, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. She told this story herself, and she told it shaking. She was hanging sheets when she noticed something at the far end of the terrace near the wall. A figure, sitting on the low brick railing with its back to her. Her first thought was that one of the family's boys had climbed up there. She called out. No response. She walked closer. The figure was wearing a yellow shirt, deep brown skin, darker than anyone she knew from the household, broad shoulders, just sitting there on the railing, perfectly still, back to her. She said, "Hey, you shouldn't be sitting up there. Come down from there." Nothing. She was 5 feet away when she noticed the neck. The figure was turning its head toward her. Not quickly, not startled, slowly, the way something turns when it has all the time in the world and wants you to know it. And as the head rotated, she saw it rotated too far. The head kept turning past the point where a neck could turn past the shoulder, still going. She ran, she made it to the stairs and fell. When the family came running to find her, she was on the second floor landing with foam at the corners of her mouth, unable to speak. It took 20 minutes and a glass of cold water before she could say a single word. She quit that week. She never came back. The family eventually had the house examined by someone they trusted, an older man from their community who had dealt with these things before. He walked through every room and spent a long time in the top room alone. When he came back down, he said something Addie has never forgotten. There is something in this house that has been here longer than your family, longer than the house itself. It came with the land. It doesn't mean you harm, but it watches, constantly. And if you go to where it lives, it will let you see it. That's its way of telling you that you've gone too far. He sealed the top room. He told the family to leave the attic alone. They did. The furniture sounds continued. They still do, Addie says, but nobody has seen the shape since. It's still up there, she told us. We just don't go looking for it anymore. There are places that communities protect their children from, not with fences or signs, but with stories. You don't go to that part of the river after dark. You don't walk that stretch of road alone. You don't go near that old field when the sun is low. In a small farming village in rural Arkansas, a community so small it doesn't appear on most maps, there was a place like that. At the edge of the village, where the property lines ended, in a dense grove of old-growth bamboo began, there was a well. Stone. Old. Nobody knew how old. It had been there before anyone's grandparents could remember. At some point, nobody could say exactly when, the community had stopped using it. Not because the water went bad, because of what started happening to the people who went near it after dark. The stories were always the same. Someone would go to the well at night. They would come back wrong. Not injured, just wrong, confused, talking about things they shouldn't know. Some of them never really came back to themselves. A few had to be cared for by their families for the rest of their lives. The old people in the village said something lived in that well, something old and patient and hungry in a way that had nothing to do with food. A young man named Nathan grew up hearing these stories. He didn't believe them. He was 22, practical, the kind of person who needs to see something with his own eyes before he'll accept it. He'd walked past that bamboo grove his whole life and never seen anything except a dark stretch of trees and an old stone hole in the ground. So one night, a rainy night in midsummer, the kind of night when nobody goes outside, Nathan took his phone, put on his boots, and walked to the well alone. The bamboo grove at night was something different from the bamboo grove in daylight. He said that immediately, the way the darkness inside it seemed thicker than the darkness outside it, the way the sound changed when he crossed the tree line. Outside, rain, wind, the normal sounds of a summer night. Inside, nothing. Not quieter, silent, like the rain was happening in a different world. Even his footsteps sounded wrong, muffled, like he was walking on something that was absorbing the sound. He kept going. His phone's flashlight cut a white beam through the dark. The bamboo on either side was dense, unmoving. Despite the storm, he could still see flashing through the gaps above. He found the well. It was smaller than he remembered from childhood. Or maybe he was bigger. The stone rim came to about mid-thigh. The inside was black. His flashlight didn't reach the bottom, or if it did, nothing down there reflected it back. He stood there for a moment, looked around. Nothing. He leaned over and shone his light down into the well. And then his phone screen went black. Not dead. He could feel it still on in his hand, warm. The screen had just gone dark, like something had turned off the display from the inside. He was standing over a dark well in the middle of a silent bamboo grove at 2 a.m. with no light. He should have left, he knows that now. Instead, he stood very still and listened. And from somewhere below him, from inside the well, he heard a voice. Low, barely above a whisper, saying one thing.
Give me water.
Nathan stepped back from the well. He said,
Who's there?
Silence. Then, from directly behind him, so close he felt the breath on his neck, the same voice said it again. Not from the well this time, from right behind his ear. Nathan ran. He didn't look back. He ran through the bamboo grove, back through the tree line, back into the rain and the wind and the world that had sound in it again. He made it to the road. He stopped. He turned around. At the edge of the bamboo grove, standing where the tree line ended and the road began, was a figure. Tall, still, no features he could make out in the dark. Just a shape, standing at the boundary of the grove like it couldn't, or wouldn't, cross it. And then his phone screen came back on. He hit record. He pointed the camera at the grove. The figure was gone. The next morning, Nathan told his grandmother what had happened. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "The people who came back from that well, the ones we said came back wrong. Some of them heard the same thing you heard. They heard it ask for water. And some of them went back the next night to bring it some. Those are the ones who never really came back." Nathan checked his phone that morning. The video he'd recorded showed exactly what he expected. Darkness, the tree line, nothing, except for one thing. In the top right corner of the frame, for exactly 4 frames, less than a fifth of a second, a face. Not standing at the grove's edge where he'd seen the figure. Closer, much closer, right at the edge of the lens. Nathan still lives in that county. He still drives past that bamboo grove every day on his way to work. He says he never looks at the well when he passes, because I'm afraid it will be looking back, he told us, and I'm afraid I'll want to stop the car. This one was sent to us by a man named Devin. He says he was there for part of it, and the part he wasn't there for, he wishes he'd never been told. Devin lives in a small town in rural Tennessee. He grew up there. He knows every road, every house, every piece of local history, including the cemetery at the edge of town.
It's an old cemetery. Pre-Civil War headstones in the back section, weathered down to smooth gray nubs that have lost their names to rain and time. The newer section has proper markers, flowers, the occasional American flag. Between the old section and the new there's a gap, a stretch of overgrown land with no markers at all. Just grass and weeds and the occasional depression in the ground where something was buried without a stone. The locals don't have a name for that section. They just don't walk through it.
Devin had a friend, a guy named Reuben, who also grew up in that town. Same schools, same roads, same stories about the cemetery. Reuben was smart, funny, the kind of person everyone liked. He was also the kind of person who thought fear was a choice you could simply opt out of. He didn't believe in what the cemetery supposedly held in its unmarked middle section. He'd walked through it twice in daylight and found nothing but weeds and silence. One night, Devin got a call from Reuben. "Come to the north end of Miller Road. I'm by the cemetery. I need you to walk with me." Devin asked why. Reuben said he'd explain when he got there. His voice sounded off. Not scared exactly. Flat. Careful. Like someone who was concentrating hard on keeping their voice steady. Devin went. He found Reuben standing at the cemetery's iron gate, facing away from it, staring down the road. He had a flashlight but wasn't using it. His phone was in his hand, screen off. Devin said, "What happened?" Reuben didn't answer right away. He just stood there for a moment. Then he said, "I need you to walk me home, and I need you to not ask me anything until we get there." Devin walked him home. 3 blocks. Reuben didn't speak, didn't look back, didn't slow down until they were inside the house with the door closed behind them. Then Reuben sat down and told Devin what had happened. He had taken the path past the cemetery on his way home from a friend's house, the direct route, the one he'd taken 100 times. When he got to the cemetery gate, he noticed something odd. A man was walking the perimeter of the cemetery on the inside, slowly, close to the fence. His head was down. Reuben stopped, watched. The man kept walking, round and round the perimeter, never looking up, moving at a perfectly even pace. Reuben called out, "Hey, you all right in there?" The man stopped. He didn't look up. He just stopped walking. Reuben called again, "Sir, are you lost?" Slowly, the man turned toward the fence. He lifted his head, and Reuben's entire body went cold, because the man was looking at him with an expression that was not quite right. Not afraid, not angry, not confused, just wrong. The way a face looks when the muscles behind it are moving to the right positions without understanding why those positions mean what they mean. It was the expression of something that had learned to look human. The man raised one hand and pointed, not at Reuben, past him, down the road Reuben had come from. Reuben turned to look. The road behind him was empty. When he turned back, the man was gone. But here's the part Reuben said slowly, carefully, watching Devin's face. He walked to the section of fence where the man had been standing. He shone his flashlight through the iron bars, down at the ground on the other side. There were no footprints in the soft earth, not in a circle, not anywhere along the path the man had been walking. The ground was undisturbed. Devin sat with that for a moment. Then he asked, "What did the man look like?" Reuben was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "That's the part I don't want to say out loud." Devin waited. "He looked like me." Reuben finally said, "Same height, same build, same face." "Devin, he was wearing what I'm wearing right now." Devin took Reuben to see an older woman in their community, someone his grandmother had always trusted. She listened to everything. She looked at Reuben carefully for a long moment. Then she gave him something small to carry, told him to say certain words before he slept, and told him not to go near that cemetery again. She also said something that Devin has thought about every day since. "What you saw wasn't waiting for anyone else. It wasn't random. It knew you were coming. It wore your face because it was practicing." "Practicing for what?" Devin asked. She looked at him. "For when it decides it's ready to use it." Reuben followed her instructions. Nothing came of it, at least nothing Devin knows about. Reuben moved out of state 2 years later. Devin says they still talk occasionally. He's never asked Reuben if anything else happened. Some questions, Devin says, you're better off not having answered. This one is short, but I want you to pay close attention, because this kind of story is deceptively simple, and that's exactly what makes it terrifying. It was sent in by a woman named Nina, about her uncle, a man she calls Ray. Ray owned a small general store in a rural town on the Mississippi River Delta. He ran the shop 6 days a week, sometimes 7, and on slow evenings he'd close up and walk home along the river road rather than cut through town. One summer night, around 10 o'clock, he locked up the store and started down the river road. The air was warm. The road was empty. Somewhere nearby, there was the sound of the water moving. He was almost past the old brick kiln, a place where the road gets narrow, when a cold wind came off the river. Not a normal wind. A cold that had no business being there in July. A cold that went through his shirt like it wasn't there. He turned toward the water. On the riverbank, maybe 30 yards out, someone was sitting on a rock, singing. The voice was low and sad and beautiful in a way that made his stomach hurt. The figure had long, dark hair that was moving in a wind he couldn't feel on his face. And the song had no words he could recognize, just a melody that pulled at something inside his chest. Ray started walking toward the water. He didn't decide to. His legs just moved. He walked and walked. The figure never seemed to get closer. But the song got louder and sadder, and the feeling in his chest got worse, like grief, like longing, like homesickness for a place he had never been. He lost track of time. He lost track of his feet. He came back to himself standing in neck-deep mud. At the river's edge, water up to his chin, his whole body numb, unable to move his legs. He couldn't have said how he got there. From somewhere behind him, a flashlight swept across the water. A night fisherman, pure accident. The man saw Ray, ran, pulled him out. They both heard it at the same time as they stumbled back to the road. From the far side of the river, a sound like laughter, high and wrong and very pleased with itself. They looked. On the opposite bank, a figure in a long garment was watching them. Long hair hanging still. No wind. The fisherman shone his light across the water. The figure was gone. Instantly, like it had never been there. Ray never walked that road at night again. This final story is the most complex one tonight, and I want to be careful with how I tell it because there are a lot of moving pieces. It was shared by listeners who asked to remain anonymous. We'll call the central figure Maria. Maria was 23 years old, living in Chicago when this started. She was smart, ambitious, and had recently applied for a very competitive scholarship to study abroad. A few months before the scholarship decision, Maria went with two friends, Jade and Simone, to a cemetery on the north side of the city. Maria's grandmother was buried there. She wanted to visit the grave, leave some flowers, a simple thing. But Jade had an idea. She had read about a ritual. You sit in a circle, hold hands, and try to communicate with spirits of the dead. Maria was skeptical, but it was late afternoon, the cemetery was quiet, and her friends were excited. She went along with it. They sat near her grandmother's grave. They held hands. They chanted something they'd found online. The temperature dropped. None of them could explain it. It was August. The cemetery guard came by minutes later and told them to leave. That night, Maria came home to her apartment and found her room completely wrecked, clothes thrown everywhere, books swept off shelves, her bedding in a pile on the floor. On the wall, written in what looked like water damage, like someone had traced letters in condensation, was a single sentence.
You're going to die.
She screamed, ran for her parents. When they came back to look, the room was still a mess, but the wall was clean. Nothing written there, nothing at all. That night, Maria dreamed of a shadow standing at the foot of her bed. The next 3 months were a nightmare. Every few nights something would appear in her room. Once, a figure made of smoke that pressed on her chest until she couldn't breathe. Once she woke to find every object on her desk spinning slowly in place. Once she heard her mother calling her name from the hallway, walked out to check, and found her mother sound asleep in her room, having never called at all. She went to a priest, she went to a spiritual advisor. Things would improve for days, sometimes a week. Then whatever it was would come back. Worse each time. One night it told her its name. David, it said, in a voice like several people speaking at once. When the priest asked why it had attached itself to her, it said, and I want you to really hear this part. She was sleeping. I was sleeping. She woke me up. She invited me in, and then tried to leave. I followed her home because I liked her house. I liked her room. The morning prayer outside bothered me, so I wanted to tear her apart. The priest pushed, asked why it was still there, and the entity said, almost casually, because someone sent me, someone who wanted what she has. It took weeks more to unravel, but eventually the full truth came out. Jade, the friend who had suggested the ritual, had been working with someone, a practitioner in a different part of the city, who promised to redirect Maria's scholarship to Jade instead. To do that, he had told Jade to get Maria to a cemetery at dusk, a liminal hour, and to collect something from her. A strand of hair, a piece of her clothing, something with her energy on it. The ritual had been the setup. That same practitioner had access to a particular entity, a spirit that could be directed, aimed like a weapon, and he had pointed it at Maria. The scholarship that Maria had applied for, Jade received it. Jade was already in London by the time any of this came out. When a senior spiritual healer finally confronted the entity directly, not the priest, but someone older and more practiced, it screamed, shook the walls, vomited black liquid through Maria's mouth, and eventually left. After 6 months of terror, it was gone. Maria recovered. She applied again for a position abroad. She got it. The healer's final word on the matter: no one can take what was meant for you. They can delay it. They can make the road painful, but they cannot take what belongs to you. What that girl tried to steal, it was never hers to begin with. 5 stories, 5 places that looked ordinary in daylight, a house where something lives in the top room and has for longer than anyone can remember, a well at the edge of a bamboo grove that asks for things you shouldn't give, a cemetery where a figure wore a living man's face and practiced wearing it, a river road where a song walked a man into the water, a girl whose friend set her up and something ancient answered the call. None of these people asked for what happened to them. Most of them just went somewhere they'd been before at the wrong time in the wrong light with the wrong amount of attention, and something noticed. If something has happened to you, something you've never said out loud because you didn't think anyone would believe it, we believe it. Send it to us. Leave it in the comments. Message the channel. Every story here started as something someone almost didn't send. I'm your host. This is the SpiritVox. We'll be back next week.